At the grade at school, kids came and still started every day with religious readings and songs, but the new principal, George Canode, lived by an ironclad honesty and skepticism for teenage smoking, even if it was just the corn silk and hand-rolled type. But there were more kids, because the school board decided to close down the Shepherd Grade School and bring the country kids to town by school bus. It was a budget-cutting measure. The school board head, Dr. George Banks, one of 2 or 3 town doctors and a doctor to many of the town's poor, appointed Mr. Canode. He also had his eye on a young man, John Wesley Harris, who just graduated from Storer College. Now, Dr. Banks knew his respected and reliable parents, his mother a laundress and a mother of 3, and Mr. Harris, a good man by all accounts, who ran the threshing machine at many farms come harvest time. Now, although John Wesley Harris wanted to become a doctor, family finances and the urgings of Dr. Banks brought him back home to teach. The Harrises had a chance to buy their own home if they could make the $2.80 a week payments on it for 7 to 8 years. Now, John Wesley Harris would be able to earn $85 a month to that goal. Shepherdstown's blacks mostly found work in homes, on farms, in the quarries where they broke the lime and carried it to trucks for loading, and closer to home at the apple packing operation of E.L. Goldsboro, Sam Skinner, and George McKee, located behind the present-day site of the Southern States. They needed about a dozen people in the packing house and others to pick the short crop of York Imperials and Ben Davis apples that had been diminished by a spring frost. Now, the big night out each week was Saturday night, when stores stayed open till midnight, and exhausted farmers and their wives and most everyone came to town to sell their dairy products to the stores, buy dry goods and sugar, and just visit up a storm from one end of the street to the other. Things have changed, but in that day and age, Shepherdstown's black people intuitively sensed it was prudent to avoid large crowds of white folks, be it along the river or in town on Saturday. Except for a bold few, they were home by 6 and remained there. In those days, white townspeople cared enough to buy new musical instruments for the McCann brothers, Frank Walker, and Ben Whiting's musical band, and they also gave a grieving black family friend their car in the event of a funeral. Still, blacks were expected to step off a narrow curb as a row of white folks approached, or to remove their hats when addressed. Moreover, certain restaurants wouldn't serve them, except in carry-out by a side entrance. And blacks who left town for any extended period who owned homes often found their homes sold out from under them, if they had been at all delinquent in paying their taxes. Thank God life has changed, and thank God we have changed. Kids, boy did they love Saturday night. If you were a kid, you could start with a vanilla soda at Hill's Pharmacy, now Thornton's Pharmacy, maybe get a few homemade potato chips from the little shop at New and Princess Street, and off you'd go to catch a show at Mr. Musser's Opera House. Except for the Molester boy, who had to sit out a few shows on account of the time when he aimed a real gun at the movie screen in progress from an adjacent back window and fired a nail through it. At auctions or anywhere, farmer folk love to talk about weather, prices, market forces, gadgets, gizmos. That September night, you could hear a lot of worried talk about the 12-cent slip that week in the corn prices, down to 45 cents a bushel. It had been $1.50 just 2 years before. But you know, you didn't have to pay as much mind to your dog now that Howard Canode's nasty little bulldog Dewey finally picked one too many fights with a farm dog and died. Hunting season was coming up soon for rabbit and squirrel. Even talk of seeing a deer here and there in the area. You know, some farmers thought it was hunting season on driving machines. While Orville and Wilbur Spahn, yep, I said Orville and Wilbur, shoed old Dan Patch for a quarter, there'd be hoots about those steel-tired tractors that broke down more than a three-legged horse. All the National Highway Garage's slick ads didn't fool anybody. And farmers, well, everybody, loved to give detailed accounts of the foolishness that seemed to plague the status-conscious and automobile-smitten upper crust. Like old First Gear Wysong, who earned his nickname for the manner in which he negotiated a steep hill. Or Harry Goldsboro, who ran out in front of a driver from Ranson on Main Street and got a tire right over his midsection and apologized for his carelessness. My fault. My medical bill. Or 73-year-old E.H. Reinhardt tearing around a hill road in Hancock and going down a ravine over and over 2 full times, ending upright in the woods with just some cracked side windows and some bewildered passengers. Mr. Scully and most everyone had to take care not to break off their little thumbs trying to crank start the earlier car models. Oh, maybe we'll get the old car another chance. Why don't we go on down to the National Highway Garage and see Mr. Russell White and George Freeman. I hear the Fords have been cut down for the 3rd time this year. They cost only $504. And old Dulicker Wells, the best mechanic in town, they say, could also give us a tip. Yeah, but besides cars, farmers like to talk about how the whoppers went out at the fish pot at Terrapin Neck one day that summer, frying up a pile of eels raked out of the fish pot near dam number 4 and just fried up by a fire at dusk right there along the river. Yeah, and those fish pot suppers were topped off with some whiskey and peach brandy from the stills at Frog Hollow. Yes, indeed. Just the other day, the newspaper says a fella checked his fish pot, you know, on the Apecan. Huh. Poor fella found this little body of a lifeless infant. And you know old Brandy's fastball, Brandy Myers, he sure warmed old Elk Shipley's mitt all summer long, didn't he?